Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Zechariah Corcimiglia, CEO of Puffsy. How you doing today, Zechariah?
Good, David. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. You know, we've overcome studio fires and many other things to make this happen.
We have, yeah. It's been a long time coming, right? I think a few weeks now. It just hasn't worked out for us. So here we are today. Perfect.
That's right.
Happy to be here.
Like the first time a light bulb has ever, it flickered for a few minutes and then it just popped and then there was the fire, like the smoke. I'm like, I just got a real strong feeling we're not going to record today.
Right. Well, we're here now. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. I always like to start with a little bit of background, Zechariah. So how did you find yourself coming to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, it's a funny story. So on Friday nights, Saturday nights, we tend to play some board games with some friends. Cannabis is usually involved in that. And, we were in a heated board game match of Catan. Don't know if you know that game, one of our favorites. And it just dawned on me there had to be a better way to consume flower. With my kind of packaging background, I started formulating kind of this idea for a single serve pod system for flowered cannabis. And that's kind of where I came up with Puffsy.
Okay. Why was it that you were looking for more of a single serve platform for flower as you were playing these games?
Yeah, so typically from my background, David, people tend to smoke pipes and bongs, kind of in my network, right? That's typically what it is. Pre-rolls sometimes, but definitely bongs and pipes, right? And I call it glass, smoking out of glass, and that's really big in the industry. From what I saw, there was a problem, right? So a consumer goes into a dispensary, grabs a jar of flour, they have to go home, they have to grind it, they get their fingers sticky, their vessels become clogged, dirty, you have to clean your vessels. And I'm like, there has to be a better way that's just plug and play, right? So that's how I developed Puffsy. And it's a 0.5 gram, all glass pod that goes into our bong attachment, our pipe. And the consumer simply takes that out, puts it into our hardware, pulls off the lid, consumes, and then throws it in the recycle bin and is ready for their next session. So we're selling convenience, and that's what we're really bringing to the market here.
Can we call it the Keurig of cannabis legally?
So in some press that we have had there that has been stated, and also, David, I don't know if you know this, but the original founder of Keurig, Peter Dragone, is actually on our team. So he is part of Convenient Cannabis, our business. So, yep. Yeah, so we like to say that Keurig of cannabis for sure.
Okay, I definitely wanted to get into that higher as well. But tell me a little bit more about your packaging background. Where did you come from?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Northeast, Rochester, New York, born and raised, lived there the majority of my life. And I went to RIT, which is a big packaging school. After I graduated, I went to work for a company called Hammer Packaging. It was a family-owned business in the prime labels and flexible packaging business. So Jim Hammer, the owner, he hired me right out of RIT, started as like a sales apprentice and did some really good things there and just worked with large CPG companies on their packaging. So designing it, what's going to sell, and just learning the ins and outs with those Fortune 500 companies. So think of companies like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, L'Oreal. And that's kind of where my packaging experience developed. I live in Louisville, Kentucky now. So once I was done with the Hammer Packaging, I was recruited away for a startup flexible packaging company here in Louisville, Kentucky. And again, just servicing large CPG companies in spirits, food and beverage, and of such. So that's my packaging background.
Uh, is this your first shot at entrepreneurship?
It is not. So my wife and I, we owned a chain of gyms here in Louisville, and we exited those in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So my second go around in the entrepreneur lifestyle. Yep.
Did you get out of the gym business just because of having to deal with the people that go to the gym?
No, not necessarily. A lot of our members were great, and they're lifelong friends. Actually, we're friends with a lot of them. It's a boutique fitness style gym, so it's not a big box gym like a Planet Fitness or a Crunch Fitness. And why we exited that business was we were approached by some competitors in the market, and they bought us out.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I guess I didn't want that to like seem negative towards like people like gym rats, but like I just mean the like when you have a customer facing business, just the day-to-day customer complaints that
For
can
sure.
sometimes pile
Yeah,
up.
no, in that style of, the boutique fitness, we didn't really have a lot of that. The memberships are quite a bit more expensive than the big box gyms, so it brings a different kind of clientele. So we didn't really have any of those frustrations. We exited in 2020. Hey, it was right at the end of the COVID lockdowns. Some other competitors in the market approached us, and then that resulted in a deal to sell the business.
Okay. I mean, the idea for Puffsy, just at a base level, when it comes to cleaning the hardware, I definitely understand that as truly beneficial.
Right. Yes.
Uh,
Yep. That's one of our main selling points to the consumers.
mhm.
That you can keep your vessel. From our focus group studies, typically, let's say a bong smoker, David, cleans his bong, he or she's bong after 1 to 2 uses. With our bong attachment and our pod, that basically creates an ash catcher kind of apparatus. They can go 10, 12 sessions without cleaning their vessel.
So, what was the design and development phase like after you had this initial concept? When you were playing amongst friends, how did you get started? Did it start with a napkin sketch, and then what was the prototyping and design phase like?
Yeah. Good questions, David. So initially, it started all from my iPhone. Right, I made a note in my notepad, Keurig for weed. Right, so and then I started developing with just the packaging engineering background I have. Initially, it was a lot of research, right? So what are the pain points of the consumer? I'm not a huge consumer of cannabis, but I know a lot of people that are. And we basically just researched a lot of the pain points, right? Then I started developing, okay, well, what is the average bowl size of a consumer? We found in our research, it's about 0.5 gram. So then after those steps, we started developing the actual pod system. And those included sketches, CAD drawings, and then ultimately 3D printing, and then finding a manufacturer for our pods
Okay.
and sourcing those.
Were you working with a design firm, or were you 3D printing these prototypes on your own?
Yeah, 3D printed in-house, working. All the design work was mostly by me. Once you go to the manufacturing level, as you probably know, there are some manufacturing constraints. We had to change those designs a little bit, but yeah, the initial designs are fairly close to what we have on store shelves now.
Okay. What kind of printer did you use? I'm just curious.
So it's actually one of my buddy's printers. I don't know what he uses I don't know what brand.
Okay.
Filament. I don't know actually what we used on this either. It's been a
Okay.
long time. It's been about a year and a half now since we
No,
started
I was just
developing this.
yeah. I have a background in product design and development, so I'm just curious as to what were your biggest issues as you were 3D printing prototypes and coming up with the idea? I mean, was the biggest issue designing for manufacturer or anything else along the way?
Yeah, the main issue that we found in our development was our locking mechanism. How are we going to make these 0.5 gram pods sit into our hardware, right?
Hmm.
And we've came up with a solution. We use food grade silicone for that. That actually fits nicely into our bong attachment or our pipes.
Okay. How is it in terms of being cost competitive from just having flour with the pipe or bong versus kind of buying the Puffsy system?
Yeah, so good questions. Right now, we are placed on store shelves at premier flower levels, right? So we want to sell convenience, but we also don't want to price ourselves out of the market, right? So right now, our pricing strategy at the retail level is to be at or just above the premium flower at whole jar flower. So that's
Okay.
kind of our pricing strategy. To kind of go through the economics of the business, when I first started this venture, I was trying to create the Puffsy brand and do collabs with well-known brands in the industry. After Peter was brought on board, we kind of took a whole look at the cannabis industry, how fragmented it is from state to state. Peter's good suggestion is, hey, well, why don't we follow the Keurig business model? And that's what we moved forward with. So in California, you can still see our jars on the shelves. However, we are pivoting and we're more of a hardware company now, servicing the brands in the space. So ultimately, what we want our brand Puffsy to be is another SKU for brands to add to their arsenal to sell into dispensaries and ultimately give their consumers. So we see our Puffsy pods with, let's say, a cookies brand. They have a pre-roll, they have a vape, they have an edible, and they have a Puffsy pod.
Okay.
And that's kind of the business direction that we're at. So our proprietary filling machines, we're leasing those to processors in legal states. Then they in turn buy our hardware, so the pods, the pipes, and the bong attachments, and then they sell their services to those brands.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Um, did you do any focus groups, or what was some of the R&D just to make sure everything was working as you expected?
Yeah, so early on in our venture, we sent out these kind of influencer kits. We wanted just to get, like you just said, basic focus research on, the problems, the ins and outs, what could we do better, even down to the grinds that we have in our SOPs for the cannabis going into our pods. So what we did was we sent out, we delivered packages in legal states, mostly in California, for the consumers to test and give us product feedback. And that's what
Okay.
we did. Yep.
So talking about SOPs, how is it manufactured? Now that you're leasing equipment and it's becoming another SKU for brands to embrace, how do you maintain like product consistency just to make sure everything works, since you're no longer in control of filling the pods?
Yeah, so we worked really closely with our processors and co-packers. I was actually just in Nevada at 2 processors just 2 weeks ago. I'm on the road quite a bit, and built into our leasing agreement, there are SOPs. And when they take delivery of these machines, we have a tech rep or a service rep that is going around to all of these pieces of equipment and making sure they're operating correctly and following the SOPs.
Are there any, because you're operating at that premium level, are there any brands or companies that you might not work with just because you don't want it to kind of reflect poorly on the Puffsy brand?
Yeah, so right now, initially, yes, that is the case. It is a premium product. A lot of these brands are used to, going to a processor and paying, less than a penny for a pre-roll, right? And then they fill it, right? This is a premium product. Brands are struggling in the cannabis space, right? There's more and more brands, over 2,600 brands in cannabis right now, and it's only growing, right? So we are kind of putting it through a screening process of what brands we want to work with. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense. You don't want to, a lot of times, particularly with new types of products or new brands, sometimes all it takes is one bad experience and then people move on to something else.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Yep.
Okay.
We're holding that very close to us for sure.
It seems like the cannabis industry is particularly mindful when it comes to sustainability and green initiatives. Do you have any concerns with single-use materials or sustainability?
Yeah, for sure. That's at the forefront of our business, and that was in my development of this. I wanted to use, people have come up to me and said, well, why don't you use different material for your pods, right? I said, well, glass is infinitely recyclable, right? So if a consumer puts this in the recycle bin, there's almost a 99% chance that this is going to recycle. It's all solid glass, right? So sustainability is at the forefront. Ultimately, we're using for our lidding, we want to use like a compostable lidding stock. So our consumers, we don't see Puffsy tags hanging all around, right? But yes, that definitely is at the forefront. We ultimately, part of our kind of scalability or our business program is we want to have a buyback program or a take back program that we want to offer the dispensaries, right? So a consumer buys so-and-so brand at their dispensary, we have a drop-off box there that we take the pods back and they get $1 off their next jar, what have you.
Okay. Could they simply be like cleaned and reused, refilled, or would they have to be like fully recycled?
We have been looking at different types of caustic washes that we can put our pods through, right, to make them like brand new without actually having to go through the recycle system. We just don't know if that's going to be cost effective initially right now. But yeah, we are looking at those. Yep.
How did things go before you recently decided to pivot?
It went really good. So we did a lot of proof of concept kind of marketing, right? So we wanted to go into the California market, which is a very hard market to break into. We're in cookie stores. We're actually selling through our distributor quite a lot of our Puffsy jars. But yeah, the reception has been really great. People want convenience. I mean, they really do. And as this kind of cannabis space or market matures, more and more consumers are going to be inundated with this, and they're going to want a convenient option. Like the new consumer isn't going to want to go and take a jar of cannabis and go home, and they have to buy a grinder, and then they have to pack everything themselves. So that's really what we're banking on for the business.
Okay. I guess before you pivoted to the brand strategy where they would lease the equipment, were you just doing everything in house? And when you were doing that, how were you sourcing flower and vetting clients that way?
Yeah. So our first processor that we worked with is called Bear Flag Group, and they're in the suburb of San Diego. So we identified them, and actually initially our first run, David, all these pods were hand packed.
Oh wow.
Yep. Okay. So just like you see a pre-roll cone kind of manufacturer without the a filling piece of equipment on the floor, that's what they were doing for our pods. So bless up to Bear Flag Group. Yeah, they've been a really good partner for us. So,
is it a bit more automated now?
Yeah, so our machine is fully automated. It can do between 40 and 50 pods a minute. And that's just our first iteration of our machine. That's a single lane machine. We have a 4-lane machine coming out that can do roughly about 160 to 180 pods a minute.
Did you develop the machine yourself, or did you go to a machine designer?
So I designed it myself, and then I went to a manufacturer that put all the pieces to the puzzle together. Yep, for sure. So the front end, you basically put the pods in, goes in line, fills, tamps, seals, comes out the back end. Yep, one operator is needed for the machine, so it's really cost effective for these operators to put one of these machines on the floor.
Are you an engineer by trade?
Yes, not really. It's more, I have more of a business development sales background, but I've always been an engineer. Like I've always been trying to solve problems. And, that's kind of what I, kind of view packaging engineering as, right? I'm trying to solve a problem, and that's kind of what I'm doing here. So.
No, you are. I mean, you're building a better mousetrap. So it was kind of, your trajectory is interesting coming out of RIT, going into packaging, and then getting into product design. It's just a unique path.
Yeah, definitely. It's been fun. What I've really loved about being in the packaging space is that every day was new, right? So working with these new CPG companies or startup companies, a new food product, they want to come up with some cool, innovative idea on their packaging. That's always got my wheels turning, right? So that's what I enjoy. And that's kind of, that's where I found pleasure in bringing Puffsy to the market.
Okay.
Solving a problem.
So one thing that I experience as a father of young kids also is the anxiety of sort of taking chances now, because it's not just your skin in the game. What was it like launching a new concept, a new business for your family and, with a new son? Or sorry, is it a son, daughter?
Yep,
Okay,
it is
yeah.
a new son. Yep, Xander. Yeah, so I went all in on this venture back in October of last year. I left. I was actually working for TIPA. TIPA, they make compostable, flexible packaging films.
Mhm.
Had really good success there. Was startup mentality. Kind of been in that startup kind of arena for the past few years of my career. So I got a really good taste of what it's like being, an entrepreneurial kind of spirited company. But yeah, I mean, being an entrepreneur, you have to take risks, and I jumped all in October, and I've really never looked back. I left that company, leaving a well-paying job. The company credit card, everything's paid for, and now it's coming out of my pocket now. So, the risks are there. But ultimately, I think I have this vision for Puffsy being a new kind of consumption method in the cannabis space that's really lacking innovation. We've seen kind of the vapes come out where they take flower and they really haven't taken off, and they've been heavily invested in. But yeah, back in October, I just said, hey, let's go all in on this. So yeah, big steps.
Yeah. Well, it's have you had any backing or additional investment, or is everything on your own dime so far?
Yeah, so everything's personally financed through me. I have one silent partner who's a good friend of mine living here in Louisville, Kentucky. He made some capital contributions in the beginning. But right now, Convenient Cannabis, we are in fundraising mode. So we'll be at Benzinga next month. We've been invited to a couple private mixer parties, meeting with VCs. But yeah, that's the majority of my time right now, David, is meeting with venture capital groups and angel investors.
Understood. Understood. It's a different side of the business versus the sort of fun engineering side. You bring the. I mean, I find that's where a lot of engineers fall down sometimes. Is there like they think the product will speak for itself, like this is revolutionary and it'll be word of mouth, and it's it takes a little bit more than that.
Yeah, it does. We've proved the concept to people like that. But a lot of VCs in the cannabis space, they've been burnt. They made a huge influx of capital. Maybe 2015. They haven't seen their returns. So we're dealing with that. One caveat to that is Peter. He speaks that lingo very well. He's been down this path quite a bit. So he's really been helpful in the venture, in the capital raising part of the business right now.
So how has the business changed since Peter Dragone came on board in April?
Yeah. So, well, we alluded to that earlier. I wanted to create the Puffsy brand, right?
Right.
And see that on, and then do a collab, right? He came in and said, hey, let's be a non-flower touching entity, right? Let's view us as a hardware company servicing the cannabis space. And it doesn't even have to be like THC cannabis, Delta 8, Delta 10, where you can sell into convenience change. But let's not be the branding side of things. Let's look at this business B2B, and we're leasing and selling our hardware to these companies. So
Okay.
that's really his biggest input so far, has been changing the business model. And after his critique and bringing that, it really makes sense on why we pivoted to that kind of business model.
How did that relationship come to fruition?
Yeah, it's funny. I was in LA, and I had just left. I think I was actually just leaving another podcast in the cannabis space. I was at the iHeartRadio studios downtown LA, and I left, and I'm like, hey, this is the Keurig for cannabis. And I got a hold of Peter. I reached out to him. He replied back and relatively quickly and said, hey, as you know, I probably get a lot of these, kind of cold calls a lot. And but this seems intriguing, and this seems like maybe a category defining product. And we just kind of hit it off ever since. And we've been working together since April, I think, April of this year, May.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, just a cold call email.
Were there any of Peter's insights that really gave you pause, where you're just like, oh, I never thought of it that way?
David, thinking off the top of my head, I don't know, none that come to mind.
Or I guess, how has the relationship worked ever since he came on board?
Yeah, he's been fairly instrumental especially in this fundraising round. So getting us ready for those big capital raises. We're not doing the friends and family round of, you throw $20,000 in, those kind of things. We're raising $1.5 million right now, looking for 500,000 right now, just to place more machines in these processors, open up different states. So I think that's one of his biggest, that's what's been helpful for me having Peter on board, is he speaks that VC lingo where I've never dealt with the VCs and board members and, the ins and outs of that. So he's been really instrumental in getting us prepared for the fundraising.
Are your equipment operations in Kentucky? Like equipment manufacturing operations?
No. So we manufacture our equipment out of China.
Oh, okay. Okay. Has there been any quality issues, or how did you find a Chinese manufacturing partner that kind of fit what you were looking for?
Yeah. In my experience so far in convenient cannabis, working with the Chinese manufacturers has been really great. They're easy to work with. They really will help any way they can. So initially, we were looking for a machine manufacturer that had some, I guess you could say clout, right? That they've been doing similar types of machines, let's say servicing the coffee industry. That's kind of where we started, right? So who's making kind of pod filling machines for coffee? And we reached out to them, did our due diligence that way, WhatsApp time calls and all that. That's kind of how we kind of did our due diligence on solidifying a manufacturer for our machines. Yep.
How is fundraising or the funding efforts, how is that going so far? Are people drawn to the new product category? As you said, some people have been had some issues in the past or been burned in the past. So what is it about Puffsy that's, really bringing people on board?
Yeah, so we've had really good luck attracting some large VC firms, both in the Louisville area and Chicago, and other big cities, Cincinnati. I've had 3 meetings last week with VC firms, more follow-ups this week actually with those, and then more on our calendar, right? I think a lot of these VCs are looking at this business at a scalability standpoint, right? So they see what the pre-roll did to cannabis and convenience, right? They understand that people like to smoke out of glass vessels. They see that this is a better mousetrap for doing that, right? So we have been able to attract some really good VC attraction. So we've been having meetings. And like I said, I think the scalability, they see that this could be a SKU in brands' arsenals that they could, market well, even from a hardware perspective, David. So like, this is just our Puffsy bong attachment, but we can do all different shapes. Think of like a big brand in cannabis. You could do like an alien head, right? Or something like that. So the branding is there as well. So, that's why I think they're attracted to it and the scalability, right? So once we can churn out pods at 160 a minute, there it goes.
How would you describe launching a new product category in cannabis? Just because we've seen some other attempts and successes and failures, how would you describe the process?
Long. Being in a business to business kind of transaction business before, David, that really helped me, right? So I've been around filling equipment the majority of my career, right? Going into all these co-packers for various different products, liquids, foods, what have you, right? But launching a new product, man, it can be tough. And if you don't have those kind of skills in your toolbox already, that can be difficult for some. For me, I think the hardest part was finding a co-packer initially to hand pack our pods, right, for the proof of concept stage. And that's what we found in Bear Flag. They were a really good supporter. What are some of the other issues that I've encountered? It's a new product, and how many times I've heard not people that aren't in the industry, but people in the industry, which I kind of found it odd. well, how do you use the product? Like how, and I'm like, well, it doesn't take a rocket science. And I mean, we even we have it printed on the back of our jars, right? So that was like one of the issues. It's just a new product, right? So you have to really dig deep and get the feedback from your consumers or your test markets, and understand what their pain points are, what they love about it and what they don't like about it. And then you kind of just build off of that. But yeah, initially it's the proof of concept was the hardest for me with industry people, right? People that are in the industry. It's like, well, why do we need another single serve or, convenience item? We have a pre-roll, right? Or a vape cart. And, I have numerous arguments against both of those things, right? Vapes, as we see, they're becoming health issues, right? So that's not a coincidence. Distillate labs are really gross. I've been into quite a bit of them. And then the pre-roll, right? People don't like smoking joints. I mean, you waste a lot of flour. Typically, brands and processors aren't putting premium flour into their pre-rolls. So, you deal with those aspects with those. With Puffsy, we're actually using a high quality flour to go into our pods.
When it comes to availability, what markets are you in right now?
Just California, and we're opening up Nevada probably next month in September.
Okay. And is the plan to go nationwide?
Yeah, it is. So into legal states, and that's what makes our business model so great, David. So we're not we're non-plant touching, right? Mm-hmm. So we're basically a machine manufacturer and a hardware manufacturer. So we can kind of pivot, move wherever we want. So, Massachusetts is another high target on us, New York, Illinois, Michigan. Those are all the big markets that we're going to be focusing on. And then even Florida now. Florida's really experiencing a boom right now. No pun intended, the boomers, give them a nice, convenient way to consume cannabis flower, what they're used to.
Yeah, I could definitely see it being, I guess, accepted by that community. So, and you said legal states. So, are you guys kind of moving away from the Delta 8, Delta 10, like where there would be availability in non-legal states?
So actually, before last week, we've thought about that, but that's a new kind of avenue we're exploring, right? For like C stores, right? So if a brand's in C store, hey, we give them this cool new product to play with and convenience, right? Actually, that was presented by a VC firm. They're like, oh, well, this is so great that we can go into C stores, right? And with our products. So that was actually really hampered down with one of the VC firms we met with last week.
Okay. Well, it seems really exciting just that you have so much changing day to day. Do you have any marketing efforts in California, or is it all kind of word of mouth guerrilla marketing right now?
Yeah. So, we partnered with High Rise. They're a big cannabis, marketing company based in LA. Aaron over there is great. He did our initial marketing for us, and that was like mostly content, right? And then we really focused on IG. We had a lot of influencers backing us. So influencers, that's social media marketing was our biggest kind of, avenue initially as we were creating the Puffsy brand. However, now we're pivoting to different marketing efforts, more like trade publications, as we're more business to business, not consumer focused, right? So initially it was all through High Rise out in LA and social media with influencing marketing. Yeah.
How'd you come up with the name?
Puffsy. I don't even know, David. I just I'm like Puff and C, like Puffsy is like, the Puffco has like a cup C. So I saw that. Puffco, right? I'm just thinking Puffsy, right? So you take a Puffsy pod.
Yeah, just a little Puffsy.
Yeah, just a little Puffsy, right?
Well, for the cannabis equipment news audience, it is a B2B audience. As a trade publication, is there anything else that we might have left out? Anything in particular that you want to make sure cannabis equipment news and our audience knows about yourself or your company?
Yeah, I think, David, I appreciate you having me. I think if a processor co-packer in a market is looking to add a new product to their arsenal that they can sell to their brands, that's lucrative for them to bring this machine on board, reach out to us. My email is zach@puffsy.com. I'll be available, to talk those things through and maybe get a machine placed on your floor. New things coming out is, we're in talks with some really significant brands in the space. So keep an eye out for, our pods in different brands, kind of arsenals, and being on store shelves soon. Definitely California and Nevada. So
what kind of ROI are companies looking at?
So with our single lane machine, greater than $250,000 a year in EBITDA, just by having that machine. That's at about 2 shifts, 5 days a week that they can make. Yep, for sure.
Excellent.
And that's just on the machine filling. From a pod perspective, they have an opportunity to grab more margin there too as well.
Excellent. Well, Zach, thank you very much for taking the time, man. I really do appreciate it. And, I'm interested to hear more about how things go as you're meeting with more VCs and you're out in the industry and people bring you on board.
Definitely. Yeah, I appreciate it. We'll keep an open dialogue. I'd love to be back, after we get some more machines on the floor and you can start seeing it at every dispensary. So that's what we're looking forward to.
So is that how you met our mutual friend that told you to reach out? Was that because were you using their equipment to fill the pods?
Schulte Hammer Mill, Dan Horowitz.
Yeah.
Funny story. Dan and I both went to RIT together.
Okay.
I remember Dan from like freshman year chemistry, and I'm like, I don't like that guy. I don't like that kid. Jim Hammer hired us both at the same time. He wanted just fresh out of young bucks out of college, and he hired us together, and we've been friends ever since. Dan Horowitz and I, yeah. But yeah, it's funny how he was in the consumer packaging kind of business, right? With me, he stayed at Hammer quite a bit longer than I did. I was only there maybe 2 years, and then I left. I moved to Louisville. But yeah, and then we both found ourselves in cannabis, him with Schulte and now me with Convenient Cannabis. So Dan said to reach out, and he love to have you, and he knows about our machines, and he's been following our journey ever since, and we talk almost weekly now. So it's that was a good intel.
Well, that's really cool. And one thing I have noticed, I ask a lot of people about this as they've come to the industry, is that cannabis kind of gets its hooks into you. So, are you in cannabis and Puffsy for the long haul, or is it sort of, once you get Puffsy up and rolling, on to the next?
Yeah. So my entrepreneur brain, David, I already have some other ideas. One maybe in cannabis, a couple other non-cannabis. That's just kind of my nature, right? So I want to build things, make consumers' lives easier. That's really what I want to do, right? So I think the ultimate goal here is to scale the business, and then ultimately have one of these multi-state operators kind of buy our technology out. I would like to be involved in the business as much as I can, if that happens, when that happens. But yeah, that's the ultimate goal. Yep, for sure.
Excellent. Well, Zach, thanks again. Hope we get a chance to do it again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate it, David.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at David@Cannabis Equipment News with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Zechariah, Corcimiglia, CEO of Puffsy, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.